Before we get on to the video, do me a favor and hit the like button, it greatly helps out the channel. Also, while you're down there, subscribe for more. Now back to the video. While falling to the ground, Lee noticed that Wonchul was planning to kick him. He activated the body strengthening skill on his feet, then he chained it with metal control, and he moved himself out of the way of Wonchul's attack. This left Wonchul questioning how Lee was able to change direction in mid-air. Following this, Lee moved himself with the skill chain, and he landed safely on the ground. He took this moment to observe the skill chain he just used. At the moment, he couldn't fly as freely as in his previous life. However, by chaining the skill body strengthening and metal control, he could control his body as much as he wanted. Suddenly, Wonchul appeared behind him, preparing to end him with a downward kick. Lee quickly noticed, and in that moment, Wonchul expressed that even though the military gave Lee some cheap buffs, that was all it was, useless and petty tricks. Lee acted quickly and he moved himself out of the way of Wonchul's attack using the skill chain. However, Wonchul's attack sent shock waves through the building, and the civilians who had grown concerned peered out their window questioning why hunters were in the middle of a battle. Wonchul, whose blood was still boiling, turned to Lee. He crouched over, and he asked if Lee was just going to continue dodging like a rat. Suddenly, he rushed at Lee again, and he shouted that Lee should come at him like before. He launched a fury of kicks, which Lee was able to skillfully dodge. Wonchul's strong kicks were kicking up a strong gust of wind that moved the cars nearby, and shook the structure of the motel. The civilians inside started to panic. They all ran outside their rooms, and since hunters were causing a ruckus, one of the civilians reported it. Lee continued to skillfully dodge Wonchul's kicks while trying to minimize the damage. Many civilians were watching, and as a military officer, he couldn't just counter Wonchul's attack fiercely. And if innocent people got dragged into this, it could ruin his plans for the Seoul Station Gate. Wonchul suddenly stopped his fury of kicks, and he turned his attention to the civilians who were still stuck in their rooms and were recording the situation. Wonchul questioned if Lee was avoiding him because there were a lot of eyes on them, so he decided to just get rid of the nuisance. He charged up an attack aimed at the motel. Lee stood in front of the building with his arms open, and he questioned if Wonchul really planned on destroying the entire motel just to fight him, and he asked Wonchul if he realized that there were innocent civilians still in the motel. He shouted that those people have nothing to do with him. Wonchul shouted back, and he expressed that the people in the building do have something to do with Lee. He rushed at Lee, while explaining that Lee and everyone in the motel pissed him off. Then he told Lee that he could dodge the attack, but if he was really desperate to save the people in the motel, then he would stop him. This really ticked Lee off. A ring of mana formed around his pupils. He gritted his teeth and in a tone of anger, he told Wonchul that he shouldn't have done this. He expressed that he will now put an end to Wonchul's life as a hunter. Lee activated the new skill he learnt recently, Metal Crush, and two interlocking mana rings appeared around Wonchul's leg, crushing it to bits. Wonchul fell to the ground, he held his leg, and he started screaming because of the pain. Lee approached slowly with a cold expression on his face, and Wonchul started crawling backwards. He questioned what led to him, and he demanded Lee stay away from him. Lee questioned Wonchul again, asking why he was going this far. Wonchul was confused by Lee's question. He explained that if a mosquito annoys him, then it's only fair that he kills it off. Lee was skeptical. He was sure that there is a reason why someone like Wonchul, who got kicked out of a pack of wolves, was snarling earlier. He expressed angrily that rascals like Wonchul who are drunk on a superiority complex don't deserve to be hunters, because from his experience they always turn out to be villains. Wonchul shouted that a piece of shit like Lee couldn't do anything to him, so he should stop acting like he is all that. Lee motioned his finger up, and suddenly a piece of metal was sticking to the back of Wonchul's neck. Then Lee expressed with a cold expression on his face that if Wonchul ever showed his face in front of him again, then he wouldn't just end it by taking a leg like he did this time. Lee's threats terrified Wonchul, and Lee, while doing his best to hold his anger back, continued on saying that Wonchul should thank God he was a military officer. In his head, Lee confirmed to himself that not killing Wonchul is the correct move, since he couldn't let this chance to save his comrade and take revenge on villains be taken away by someone like Wonchul. At dawn, the authorities arrived, and they took Lee and Wonchul in for questioning. At the Awakened Task Force building, Lee testified that he was simply trying to stop Wonchul. The man who was questioning Lee accepted this, as it was consistent with the witness's statement. But Wonchul is problematic and vicious, so he questioned how Lee was able to get so lucky as to survive. The man expressed that this is his first time as a police officer, seeing a low-ranking hunter get out of a fight with a higher-ranked hunter without so much as a scratch. Lee expressed with an awkward expression that he got lucky, and he only survived thanks to Wonchul's armor suddenly bursting open. With this, the man was done questioning Lee, meaning he was free to go. Lee quickly made his way outside the station. For all of his life he thought being an F rank was a shitty label, but he didn't expect it would help him avoid suspicion. After Lee left, one of the workers came running to the man who was questioning Lee. This person asked the man to look at something. He reported that Wonchul's armor had no durability issues or mana overturn. The man grabbed the report, and he started reading through it in disbelief. If it wasn't the case the Wonchul's armor malfunctioned, then he questioned if this person was saying an F rank crushed a C rank's armor and took him down without a scratch. The man couldn't believe it as it made no sense. Outside the station, Lee crouched down, and in a burst of speed, he quickly moved through the city. As he made his way through the city, we could see from his face that he was deep in thought. Then in a flashback we see Lee in a hospital reacting to a breaking news. The news presenter reported that the death toll of citizens stranded at the gate of Seoul Station, which began at 15:20 today, has been confirmed at 745 so far. Except for the first, second, and third wave, this was a monster disaster unlike one humanity had ever seen before. Lee continued to stare at the TV in disbelief, and the news presenter continued on reporting that the Seoul Station tragedy has increased the criticism from hunter experts and civil society organizations, who are raising questions about the fundamental limitations and problems with the current gate response system. In the present, Lee continued heading for Seoul Station at top speed. He was a bit concerned because unlike the previous two gates, he had no first-hand experience with the gate opening today, meaning his information on variables that may appear are limited. He stopped at the entrance of Seoul Station, which was extra busy. Lee knows because of his memories of the future that of all of the monster disasters, the Seoul Station disaster was one of the worst. Lee arrived at 15:16, and he couldn't help but question if he would be able to handle this gate with his current progress. He entered Seoul Station, and because of how packed it was, part of him wanted to go on a rampage and evacuate the general population. However, there were guards present who would question him, so that was out of the picture. Also, he knows that there is a villain hiding in the crowd here, and if things go wrong, and the villain goes into hiding, then he will never find the turning point that changes the future. He stood in the middle of the crowd, and he took a deep breath in. Then he turned his attention to a clock. There was 2 minutes left before the gate opened. Suddenly, a familiar voice could be heard calling out to Lee. This surprised him. After catching up to Lee, Seonna crouched over and she placed her hands on her knees, and she started catching her breath. She told Lee she had been looking for him for a long time. The appearance of Seonna took Lee by surprise and he wondered why she was here. Seonna informed Lee that she heard he went to the police station and that the whole unit was going crazy. Lee, with a puzzled look on his face, questioned how Seonna knew he was here. Seonna reminded Lee that he told her he had plans at Seoul Station on his last vacation day, but she questioned why he wasn't picking up his phone. Lee was confused. In his previous life, Seonna wasn't here, and he questioned if this was happening because he changed the past. He told Seonna that he wasn't responding because his phone got crushed. Then he turned his attention to a clock. There was only 1 minute left before one of the worst gates in the world opened. Seonna then asked Lee to give her the reason why he was taken into the station. Lee looked at her. There was no time for him to dilly-dally, and from now on he must stick to his plan. The 1 minute was up, and Lee quickly took off the bag he was carrying, and he dropped it on the floor, and metal spheres came spilling out. The metal spheres tripped the crowd of people who were walking by. They shouted at Lee, questioning if he was a madman, and they explained to him, while shouting that he couldn't just spill stuff at the dead center of Seoul Station. Seonna was highly concerned at this point. First, Lee wasn't answering her when she was talking, and now he was acting strange. Lee looked upwards, towards the ceiling of Seoul Station, and he told Seonna to run and find a gas mask when he gave the signal. This really confused Seonna, and she looked at Lee with a concerned look, questioning what was wrong with him. The crowd of people who were disoriented by the metal spheres started maneuvering through them, and suddenly they were hit with a strong gust of purple wind. Just outside of the Seoul Station building, we see a mother and a daughter saying their goodbyes. The daughter questioned why her mother was asking her to leave so much, and she expressed that she wanted to watch her get on the train. With a smile, the mother told her daughter that she doesn't want her to get tired. The daughter asked if her mom isn't sad. She told her that they don't even know when they will be able to see each other again. As the two discuss, a black veil started encircling the Seoul Station building. However, because of their conversation, they didn't notice. The mother was about to tell her daughter when they will be able to see each other again, but the black veil quickly finished encircling the Seoul Station building. In a shock, the daughter fell to the ground, and she stared at the black ball that had formed, calling out to her mom. A 6-hour timer and a prompt appeared on top of the black circle that had formed around Seoul Station. It was a new event, and an unlucky one that had occurred in this zone. One could enter the zone, but cannot leave. The entry-level restriction is level 15, and it will be imposed strictly on the zone. And the only way to escape is to survive for 6 hours or defeat the boss monster. Inside the building, a purple gate appeared on the ceiling, and a spider-like monster stuck its head out of the gate. Seeing this, Lee took off running, and he gave Seonna the signal to go and find a gas mask. The monster appeared fully out of the gate and it started terrorizing the civilians. In the chaos of the civilians running away, Lee stopped. Then he stopped Siana and he told her that she should get to safety first and find a gas mask from the passenger aid station. Siana gritted her teeth. She reminded Lee that she was a soldier as well, and this time she didn't intend to survive by cowering. Since she wasn't a combat-type soldier, she informed Lee that she will be in the back evacuating civilians and treating the wounded. She had no idea what Lee was trying to do, but based on his results from the past missions she decided to trust him, and she commanded Lee as his platoon leader to stay alive at all costs. Lee smiled, and he expressed that he planned on following her orders. Back at the military, inside one of the higher-ups' office, one of the executives was questioning Kang Seok's recent advocation for Lee. The executive questioned if Kang Seok really planned on commissioning a lowly soldier ranked at F as an officer. Kang Seok referred to this person as Brigadier General, and he expressed that he doesn't believe that the assessment of talent is important. In his belief, to be an outstanding officer shouldn't be limited to the mechanical grading of a hunter's rank. This left the Brigadier General questioning Kang Seok. So Kang Seok explained that the ranks are not tied to a hunter's level. It is merely a basic metric assigned at the Hunter Training Center as per the expected outcome of a trait, and their aptitude in a raid fight, and for effectiveness in real-life battle. But as players leveled up, the military has been forced to adjust their ranks. In spite of this fact, undervalued skills are dying on the field. Choi Yun-cheol, the 3rd Amp Brigade Brigadier General, through his casting of large-scale magic, he single-handedly proved that he possesses military force rivaling a tactical weapon. He is a rank hunter, ranked 31st in Korea, and that same man questioned if Kang Seok was trying to educate him right now. Kang Seok trembled, and he replied saying he wasn't. Yun-cheol told Kang Seok that all veterans are joining civil guilds, and he questioned if anyone would apply to the AMT if Kang Seok commissions a lowly F-rank soldier as an officer. In a serious tone, he questioned if Kang Seok was saying something was wrong with the military system, and he expressed out of concern that Kang Seok might as well be going around shouting that the AMT needs to be done away with. Kang Seok lowered his head, and his hat covered his disappointed face. Yun-cheol continued on saying that Kang Seok must have seen something in that guy Lee. However, an insect is still an insect. At that moment, Yun-cheol received a call on his office phone. He picked up the call, and he received a report that a gate appeared within the 1st Battalion's post area. The person reporting expressed that the gate opened in Seoul Station, and on top of that it's an unlucky event. This took Yun-cheol and Kang Seok by surprise. The scene then shifts to inside Seoul Station, and we see 3 guards using the flamethrower rune on the spider-like monster that came out of the gate. The monster turned its attention to one of the guards that was distracted. The guard had turned his attention to the team leader, and he was questioning what type of monster this was. He had never seen one of these in the field guide before. The monster quickly moved through the fire, and it prepared to pierce the distracted guard with its sharp leg. Luckily, the team leader noticed, and he started making his way over to save the guard. The team leader was able to move the guard out of harm's way. However, the guard passed out in the process. Joan Manhwa, a C-rank veteran hunter with the Gladiator trait, and Seoul Station Group 2's team leader, took out a shield and a short sword. He expressed to the others that fire attacks won't work, and he ordered the other guards to switch to a frost rune so they could bind the monster's legs. The guards quickly started switching to a frost rune, and before the monster was able to attack Manhwa, they were able to bind its legs. Taking into account the monster's size, Manhwa knew that the frost bind wouldn't last long, and he wanted to at least take out the monster's eyes before it broke free. He rushed at the monster while shouting for his team members to keep up the frost attack so he could go in and attack by himself. He jumped over the monster's head. However, as he was charging up to attack the monster's eye, the monster looked up at him. Then it suddenly broke free from the bind skill, and it opened its mouth so Manhwa would fall right in. Manhwa quickly lifted his shield, covering his chest and head, and suddenly the metal spheres that Lee had spilled earlier started flying at Manhwa. The spheres hit Manhwa's shield, moving him out of the way of the monster's mouth. This shocked the monster, and it turned its attention to the direction where the spheres came from, and Lee approached the monster with a determined aura about him. He had many concerns, however this wasn't the moment for him to be doubting himself. He activated the Metal Smash skill, and an aura ring formed around his pupils. An aura ring also formed around the monster's torso. As the skill was activating, the monster's armor required more mana for it to be completely crushed, and as Lee poured mana into the skill, he received notifications warning him about his rapid mana depletion. Lee continued on, and with 76% of his mana left, he was able to completely crush the armor off what seems to be the monster's abdomen. This left Manhwa and the other soldiers completely shocked, and Lee started to get more confident in the thought that with his current power he could stop this gate. He smiled menacingly because not only could he stop this gate, he can have the rewards for clearing this gate all to himself. The injured monster stumbled around, and after getting its bearings it stood and it let out a battle cry. Lee, with a grin, used metal control to manipulate some of the metal spheres he spilled all over Seoul Station, and he expresses to the monster that it could howl all at once, since he will squeeze out and devour the very last bit of temper the monster has left in it. He sent the metal spheres in, and as the spheres hit the monster's exposed weak spot, Lee expressed that it was time to see if the monster's insides were as hard as steel too. The metal spheres struck deep in the monster's exposed flesh, and using metal spin, Lee spun the metal spheres at high speeds. The monster screamed out in pain as the metal spheres grinded their way to its insides. Lee laughed, and he asked the monster to tell him how it feels to have its insides be grounded like it was in a blender. The monster screamed out in pain one last time, and suddenly afterwards it fell to the ground beside Lee. Manhwa was in a state of shock. The entire garrison of guards couldn't lay a finger on that monster, yet Lee killed it single-handedly. On top of that, in his countless raids, he had seen many a rank hunters, however never has he met anyone who is this laid back. He wondered if this was the power of an S-rank hunter that is mentioned in stories. The villain, who was still hidden, was ticked off. He spoke to himself, questioning who this bastard was that was ruining his quest by appearing out of nowhere. Manhwa approached Lee, and he introduced himself. He then asked Lee if he was perhaps an S-rank hunter. Lee, who was looking up at the gate, told Manhwa that he shouldn't lower his guards so quickly. This confused Manhwa, so Lee explained while still looking up at the gate that the first wave wasn't over yet. Manhwa turned his attention to the gate, and to his horror 2 spider-like monsters, like the first one, appeared from the gate. Lee looked up with his signature evil grin. He no longer had any doubts, as the battle with that monster made it certain. The Seoul Station gate, he will be the one to stop it. He lifted 2 fingers up, and he motioned the metal spheres to attack. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then hit the like button.